and help me with the city commission.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's work session. Al, could we start with roll call, please?
Okay, this is roll call for the work session. Benson.
Benson here.
Benson's present. Brunig.
Brunig here.
Brunig is present. Sarda.
Sarda here.
Sarda's present. Mybaum.
Mybaum's here.
Mybaum's present. Minor.
Miner's here.
Minor's present. Moser.
Mosier here.
Moser's present. Schramm.
Schramm here.
Schramm's present. Weber.
Weber is here.
Weber's present. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson is here.
Mayor Johnson's present. City Manager Leon.
Leon's here.
City Manager Leon is present. City Attorney Denherter.
Denherter here.
City Attorney Denherter is present.
Now's the time for public appearances. If there's anyone in the audience who would like to address the commission on an item not on the work session agenda, now would be the time to do that. We have no one physically present here. Dave, you're watching YouTube. Any comments there for us?
I do not have the YouTube stream up yet. I'm about 11-second delay behind you guys, so
Sure.
maybe it's coming up.
We'll assume there's no comments, but if there are, please let me know, Dave.
Will do.
No comments in YouTube.
Okay, excellent. Tonight we're going to discuss the Summit Activity Center, where the history of that agreement with the school district and what we might want to think about as we consider the future of that agreement and our role in it. And so I'm going to turn it over to the city manager, and she will get us started.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor. Members of the commission, you all are going to get a little bit of an information overload this evening. So we might not have a lot of time for discussion, but we can always talk about this at another work session, or we could put it actually on the agenda as well. I have quite a few goals tonight. I do have Todd Larson on the call as well. He's going to walk you through a lot of the details. And Al will help out as well when we get to the financial portions of the discussion. I did invite Dr. Kindle and also told him to, invite anybody on staff that he would like to participate in the meeting, but I gave him sort of an overview. I don't know if he was available tonight or not, but if we do hear from him, he may have some comment, but he knows we're not deciding anything tonight. We're just starting a conversation. So tonight we'd like to talk a little bit about history and give you an overview and understanding of the agreement that we have with the Yankton School District for our shared facilities. We also want to talk about some changes that have occurred since the time of the agreement, the early 90s, and since the building was built in 1995. Talk a little bit about the financial picture of the Summit Activity Center historically, and then recently, pre-COVID, and then talk about the financial picture and what's been happening since COVID-19, because that certainly has changed the dynamic of our understanding. And then talk a little bit about some long-term ideas that we should probably start kicking around, you should start kicking around as a commission, and talking with the school about. So with that, I'd ask you to turn to the actual agreement. There's a couple of different versions of it, but the one that I'm interested in talking to you about this evening is the 1992 version of the agreement. And as you're getting to that, I will cue Todd here to talk through just the basics and sort of the structure of the agreement.
So a lot of the 91 and 92 agreement are the same. They were 25-year term agreements. And again, that means it expired in 2016, resets for another 25 years into 2041. Exhibit A of the agreements just breaks up the areas into education areas, school as primary use, administrative guidance areas, classrooms, circulation support, hallways, and ancillary areas. Exhibit B was recreation and co-curricular areas, and the city would have primary use, think Summit Activity Center, end of the building. Exhibit F in both of them, and G get into the joint financing of what was going to be paid for by each entity when they built it. And Exhibit G starts to do the cost share, and we'll come back to that as we go later. In the 92 agreement, again, some numbers changed. And again, there was the bond that was passed to do the project, and then lawsuits, and there was a 20-month time frame where there was a lawsuit, and so there was inflation, and things changed by the time it was going to be built after things had been voted on and approved. So anyway, in the 92 agreement, Exhibit C starts to lay out that the school land, think outside facilities, but land is going to be owned 60% by the school, city by 40%. And so now when you start, again, we'll get into this a little later, as we start talking percentages and who pays for what, when the minute we think about outside facilities, tennis courts, softball fields, football fields, don't think about the track. That's a whole nother entity that came after the fact. So other things, 60% school, 40% city. What does that mean? It means a lot of different things. School mows and weed trims the majority of that property, but the city mows in front of the Summit Activity Center. School removes snow and ice on the majority of the property. When there's theater rentals, that's school that needs to take care of snow and ice for the public, not the city. City removes snow on the sidewalks and in the parking lot out in front of the SAC. We don't do the school parking lots for the students or the teachers. That's the school doing that. School maintains the tennis court lights, the trail lights, parking lot lights. So there's a lot of different moving pieces as we go. But that's how those two agreements kind of fit together and break down. And I don't know if Amy wants to touch on anything else in the 91, 92 agreements. I have that we can scroll through them, but it's a lot of stuff.
No, there isn't anything else I'd like to add, Todd. I just wanted the commission to be aware of sort of the fundamentals of the agreement, and then to understand that there's a 1994 additional amendment, and that outlines the Yankton College space. So the city and school were given some funding to build the additional, make room for the additional Yankton College space, and that's where they still reside today. Now they are planning on a move. The agreements do allow us to get out of those agreements or renegotiate those agreements. There's, a period of time which we'd have to give a heads up. We have a committee, a city school committee, and there's a couple of you commissioners on that right now. I believe it's Johnson, Benson, and Sarda who are on that committee for the time being. And so we haven't had recent meetings, but occasionally there's items that come up that we need to talk about. This is one of those relationships or partnerships that's we like to call it city of marriage. We're in it together, and we work through things together. Going back in time, and this will get a little bit into the history that I want everyone to understand or correct me on, but this is the history as I see it. That facility wasn't built as large as the community wanted it initially, and that was because of some of the things Todd mentioned. There was a lawsuit involved, and they couldn't, after waiting some time, they had to scale back on their project. So even back in 1995, which was 25 years ago now, it wasn't built to the standard or to the size that both entities would have preferred. But it got done. Going forward now to where we are with fitness in our community, it feels like it's shrunk even further. So lots of differences between 1992 or 1995 and today. One of those is that when this facility was built, we were kind of the only game in town when it came to public recreation. So of course, we have our own interests in this relationship. We're, as a city, primarily interested in public recreation. That includes kids. The school is primarily interested in student athletes and student recreation. So that we both have primary interests, and we are coming together for the community interests. But in 1995, if Yankton was like where I went to high school, basketball was in the winter, football was in the fall, wrestling was in the winter, and so throughout the whole calendar year. And once your sport was over, it was over by and large. That's not how people operate anymore. If you are in a sport and committed to it, you're training all year long, indoors and outdoors, throughout the season. So that adds to the use of the facility. We also have the situation where we're not the primary provider of community fitness. So at the time it was built, and I'll look to Al, but I don't know that there was any private fitness clubs in Yankton. There may have been some starting, but now we have Anytime Fitness, Empower Fitness. We recently had a yoga studio. I don't believe that's open right now, but we had a yoga studio. Mount Marty Fieldhouse has a community component. We have Great Life that has a couple of different types of recreational facilities. Avera has a health facility. There's access to Peloton. I don't necessarily understand what that is because it looks too difficult whenever I see it on TV. But it's a type of fitness facility that we have and can participate in. Also, in 1995, you did not have access to these types of devices where you can live stream really almost any type of workout facility, workout program, workout class for a lot less than you might be able to pay for a recreation or fitness, I guess, membership. So a lot has changed there. We've really tried hard to stay competitive and to stay I guess, affordable for the community. But that's really difficult to do because the expenses don't change. Also, fast forward today, now that building's 25 years old, we've seen in recent years some really big improvements that needed to be made. We had to upgrade the HVAC system in the Aquatics facility. We've had to upgrade the parking lot. We got into that project and realized that it was a lot more than we had anticipated, both the school and the city. We're going to start having major technology changes and needs in that facility. I think another thing that's brilliant and difficult about that facility, when it was built, we weren't talking as much about safety concerns as we did with school. So even before COVID, I don't, at least where my mind was in the early 90s, we didn't talk about active shooter and those types of things, and the world just seemed like a little bit more of a different place than it is today, or at least we weren't as maybe aware as we are today. That facility now presents some security challenges because it's adjacent to the school. We've done a great job between the city and the school of managing potential issues and potential problems, but the fact of the matter is we can't be open 24 hours. We do have to have some supervision. And we do have student-public crossover, which can be really good for integrating and engaging in the community. But it can also be really bad when you have people that don't know how to respect, the rules or respect even the laws of the community. So, that's something we think about too when we talk about that facility also. Now, fast forward to 2020 and 2019 with COVID-19. Wow, that makes it even more difficult. So right now, you guys are probably aware that we are closing down early on Wednesdays to give some space to the student athletes. And then we reopen later in the evening. We do a thorough cleaning cycle through between each group use, with the shared goal of trying to keep kids in school as much as long as possible and kind of separate them from the community use. That's been difficult. Now that sports are going to be moving entirely inside, I think we're going to have more of a problem, and we don't really know what that looks like yet. We'll be meeting shortly with the school and with Ryan Moores and his team and Jason Beats to talk about what that's going to look like for winter sports. But if that's the case and we have to shut down early, more days of the week, that's less value for the member. We have scaled back on our rates for our members because we're giving them less of a product. We haven't had community fitness, group fitness classes since March. We've had limited hours. We've had limited access to the aquatics facility. So we didn't feel it was right to charge the same. So we've scaled that back, but the expenses really didn't go away. Many of the expenses didn't go away. So Todd and his staff have done a great job with protocol. I'm not aware so far of anyone who's said, oh, we've had a contact or know that there's been a positive at the SAC and it's been spreading there. Of course, that's always difficult to pinpoint, but to my knowledge, they've done a fantastic job and people have respected the distancing. Many do wear masks, or some wear masks even when they're up there at that facility. And we've done a good job, as good as we can, separating those user groups. But we have that challenge too. One thing that's to our advantage today that hasn't always been back in time, and I think it's fair to say this, and may not always be in the future, is the city and the school have a really great relationship. So I think in the past there's been some maybe city managers that are stubborn and dig their heels in. I can't imagine. But there's also probably been some school board or school district employees that may have been the same way. We have a really great relationship right now, and I think that is to our advantage. The time to talk about difficult things is not when you already have rubs and personality conflicts. So as we identify issues, and if there's issues that we want to resolve or challenges we want to look towards resolving, Dr. Kindle is the person that I'd like to be working with in that regard. And so we've had a lot more open communication, I feel, than I've heard has happened in the past. So I think that's worth talking about because I think it's valuable to talk about. So I want to have now, just before we talk about finances, and what I'd like to do is have Al, you talk to the commission about how we finance the Summit Activity Center, and then I'm going to have Todd talk a little bit about recent numbers at the Summit Activity Center and then what we think is going to happen going forward. But before we do that, I also want to remind the commission that we also run our recreation programs out of the Summit Activity Center. This year we limited that way back. We canceled one session. We had a limited session. That's a very popular program. I will say there are differences now in that as well than there was back in the early 1990s. I think there were some non-school, non-city affiliated sports teams, but it's certainly been true since I've been here that more sports have been added and private groups have created leagues, which is awesome. It's maybe easier to communicate now online. They use our spaces, but they've created their own leagues. And if you're in a youth baseball program at the city, you might also be in a youth baseball program that's affiliated with another organization and not the city. So there are some options. We used to have a Boys and Girls Club, true, but I think everyone can say our Boys and Girls Club is pretty robust now, and I think it's providing a lot more. So that's another option of recreation, or I guess it's not all recreation, but it's also another option of activity for kids to enjoy, especially, during the summer and when their parents are working. So, Al, before we talk about how the SAC is financed, I guess I'd ask the commission, do you have any questions right now? Or we can ask Dave if there's anything coming up on YouTube. Okay, I'm hearing nothing. So, Al, how do you find all the money to operate the Summit Activity Center?
We look under rocks, we pick trees. The beginning of the Summit Activity Center, as you can see by the agreements in here, it was approximately a 60%, 40% split, 60% school, 40% city, and that was based on what what the city was looking at for facilities for recreation and what the school was looking at for a little bit of recreation, but more or less for classroom space and stuff like that. And keep in mind, it wasn't just the Summit Activity Center that the school was talking about. The school also took on the project of remodeling the at the time, the current high school and creating a middle school out of that. The 40% city portion, we basically passed a second penny sales tax. Again, it was an opportunity that the state had allowed. The state was pretty restrictive on what that second penny could be used for. When we passed it for the construction and capital improvements to the Summit Activity Center and street and storm sewer improvements. And we still have that in place. We've modified it very slightly, but basically we still call it a second penny, and that's what we use the funding for. That does not pay for our current operations. Our operations at the SAC are paid out of general fund dollars, basically. I mean, we have a Summit Activity Center fund, but the revenue does not cover all the expenses, and anything short of that is a transfer from our general fund.
And Al, I happen to have the transfer, so just by means of an example, in 2015, we transferred $199,110 from the second penny to the general fund to cover operating expenses. Fast forward to 2018, that went up almost 100,000, increasing almost steadily over time to 295,626. In 2019, we transferred 342,000. In 2020, we budgeted 380,000, but because of everything that didn't happen, and because of rolled back memberships, and because of maintenance that had to be done, we plan that we're going to be transferring something more like 580,000 or 600,000. And in 2021, who knows? We just don't know, especially with the onset of what we're going to need to do to make sure that we're separating our user groups. Todd will talk a little bit more about numbers and revenue in more detail and give you some reasons as to why that is. But the basic reason is that our expenses haven't changed a lot. They've increased really because of maintenance. But our revenue has gone down. Now certainly the commission can choose to continue to transfer second penny. You can transfer all the second penny, and if Adam's listening, he'll probably have a nasty chat there, but you can take all the second penny and transfer it to the general fund for the Summit Activity Center if you'd like to. That's within your purview. That just means that's money less that we'll spend on streets and sewer and water, infrastructure, those types of things. But you can do that. So we don't have to change a thing, and we can keep, what it feels like kind of shoveling in coal into the fire. But when we notice over time that there's trends that are not probably serving us the best way, i.e. Fox Run Golf Course, we want to bring it forward to you and see if there's something different that you want to start thinking about. We don't today know what that is or have a solution for you right now, but just to bring that forward, that this is a train coming down the track that we're going to need to talk about. So with that, Todd, do you want to give a little more information about sort of where we are annually and some of the things you've noticed in terms of numbers and memberships and all those good things?
You betcha. And as we were talking on that 1991 agreement, number 5 in the 1991 utilization of common facility, they talked about wanting it to be to the greatest extent possible, the usage. And again, when I came to town, Bob Winter and Joe Gertzma and Chuck Turner, we had our city school meetings regularly, and again, they can continue to convey to me that the usage that we get in that facility is beyond what anybody expected. And so it's been a great thing, but with that usage comes, as Amy has mentioned, the building gets older and things need to be replaced and need to be better than what they were, and some of those type of things. So again, the 94 Yankton College agreement, one thing to note there is we've confirmed with them they're probably going to move out to the Mead building in 2022. Their 30-year agreement expires for that space in 2024 at the summit. Nothing is spelled out in documents or agreements for the future use of that area, and the school has talked about wrestling area, so that's why they're in a confined space and not upstairs in the weight fitness area. But again, nothing like that could happen until 2022 at least. So other documents that I put in there were the 1998 percentage and 1999 percentages documents. Again, that's just a reference to start to show how usage was broken down when it came to cost sharing. The school bills us, and we bill the school each year. And so through time, some of those percentages have changed. Again, this is an example of the quarterly billing that I'm showing you that you should be able to see. Again, things to note: janitorial, custodial on the other end of the building, not at the Summit Activity Center. We, the city, pay 10% on it. Electricity down on the school end, high school end, natural gas, we pay 20% of those bills. And these are quarterly bills. So in a given year, looking at 2019, what we paid to the school for our share of things was about $130,000. But then also realize we, the city, are billing them quarterly. So it offsets a little bit, but we don't bill them $130,000 by any means. But anyway, there's just a lot of different percentages. Weight and fitness area upstairs might be 50-50. The pool, the city is going to be in for 89%. The school is going to be in for 11%. If you go in the auxiliary gym, city's in for 16, school's in for 84. A lot of different percentages. Gymnastics room, that in time changed. City doesn't put any money in there. They don't. It's not rented out to the general public, and the school felt that was a school-only facility, so we got zero there. The new track, when it was built, the city was asked to participate. They didn't participate. We don't have a lot of shared expenses on the outside track. So again, a lot of different moving parts there. But as we talk through finances now, let me open up my other documents, and we got a lot of them. These were shared with you, so again, you can reference these on your own. But in the past, the Summit Activity Center would have gymnasium space, aquatics area, fitness equipment, fitness classes, a small track upstairs. We were attracted to families. Well, with very limited gym space, very limited aquatics, no fitness classes, now we're at limited hours also, it's going to be hard for us to attract fitness members in general, let alone families. So we have a little bit of a changing landscape. The wrestling area is what we're concerned about now. They're going to meet, and we'll know more from the state on what they're doing with indoor sports for the winter, and that'll come through Ryan Moores, the athletic director. But the wrestling area, wrestling team up there, think Monday through Friday, 3:30 to 6 o'clock, and then think some Saturday mornings with a lot of wrestlers upstairs in our weight fitness area. So we got to think about that as we talk through these numbers. In the fall, we've had more inquiries about refunds. We had 19 total so far this year. 11 of those came back in March and April. 8 of them have come now in the fall because people said, well, we'll put our memberships on hold. We'll see what it does in the fall. If we get over the peak, we're not over the peak. And so we don't know when the peak is coming. And so now we've had a few more refunds. Again, we do have a different membership structure, and now we're kind of going to go to the model where everybody has to have their own membership. We don't have couple memberships. We don't have families. Every individual, no matter the age, and right now our facility is only 14 and above. Everybody has to have their own membership at $15 a month. If they buy a yearly membership paid at one time, it'd be down to $12 a month. In looking at expenses and revenues from 2010 to 2019, And this document was just expenses that I have up on the screen now. Personal expenses were up 31%, operating expenses were up 24%, capital expenses were up 130%. So again, things that Amy has referred to, the HVAC project 2 years ago out at the summit for the pool area, the parking lot. Roofs have been redone across that entire building. Walls get painted on a regular basis. We're in the process now of doing carpets throughout the entire facility, both SAC and RN. So capital depends on the year, can be very high compared to where we were at the beginning. Revenue. Revenue is up about 15%. So again, other expenses up 30%, 25%, revenue is up 15%. Our membership and rental revenue in 2019 was $284,500 about, compared to 2010 when it was $230, so that was up 25%. Again, it's hard to look at just 1 year snapshots. In 2013, we had the highest ever revenue, and that was almost $301,000. So 2019 would be down 5% from 2013. So again, it's hard to look at just single years as you pull things out, but total SAC revenue and miscellaneous revenue in 2019 were the highest ever at $478. As Amy has referred, the general fund transfer in 2019 was the highest ever, also at $342. And again, she went through some of the different transfers, and again, it goes up some years and goes down some years. Total number of memberships. And again, as you start to look and think, memberships is different than members. So always got to remember those. Memberships is different than members. Total number of memberships was at its highest in 2018. We had 1,223 memberships on the books at our peak in 2018. So that's not that long ago. Total number of members was at its highest in 2014, 2,442. Think family and couple memberships, the number of those is down as we've gone through the years. Total number of fitness class attendees was at its highest in 2019. Again, if you go back in time, when that facility opened and when I came to town, you had to, if you wanted to go to the open swim, you paid one fee. If you wanted to use the water slide, you had to pay an additional fee. Summit Activity Center memberships did not include fitness classes. You bought a membership to the facility, and then if you wanted to go to water aerobics or a class over the noon hour, aerobics, step aerobics, morning boot camp, you had to pay extra for those. So again, in time, we combined those fitness classes and the water slide into memberships as we were raising membership fees. But our fitness class attendees, highest it had ever been in 2019 at almost 15,000 class attendees. As we talk about those numbers, if the SAC could get back to 2,442 members in 2021, again, now everybody that's a member has to have their own membership. So now those two kind of, you can talk about them the same. But that's $180 a year per member if they're doing it month by month, not the $120 a year if they pay a lump sum. We don't have that many that do that. Total membership revenue, again, if we were at 2,442 members, would be $440,000. That'd be an increase in membership revenue from 2019 of $155,000. If expenses would not increase, that would reduce the general fund transfer to $186, which would be just a little bit lower than what it was in 2015. To make up that 186, almost 187,000, we would need an additional 1,039 members. You're talking about a 50% increase over 2014's numbers of members. Examining adult and recreation youth revenues. Again, examining adult and youth recreation revenues show very little change over the past 10 years in regards to net revenue. When examining adult and youth recreation programming, Net revenue does not take into account full-time wages or facility overhead costs. We're only usually talking about direct expenses, which would be if we have to buy new balls, if we're going to buy t-shirts, if we're buying trophies. Again, direct expenses that we have to spend to do that program. And of course, instructor wages would be indirect expenses. But full-time staff overhead, not accounted for in net revenues. In examining Great Life check-ins, we've had some of those questions. In January of 2020, it was the highest ever at 1,845 check-ins in that month. In August, we had 531 Great Life check-ins. Revenue-wise, in 2019, we brought in almost $10,000 from those Great Life check-ins. In 2020, year-to-date, last week, at the end of the week, we're at 7,088. So Great Life check-ins is a bright spot for us in generating some revenue at the facility. In examining the summer recreation programming, our revenues and the fees we charged per class have stayed relatively flat, while expenses, again, have continued to rise a little bit. Again, thinking about different things we could have done or did or tried to do. Again, going back in time, we did try childcare at our facility at the summit, so that way a parent could drop off a child in our room. We'd have somebody staff there to entertain the child for that 45 minutes to an hour when the parent went upstairs to work out. We heard about what a great offering that would be. No other facility offered it. We tried it different times of the week, different days of the week. Numbers never panned out with what we had to pay to staff the room to what we were generating in members and revenue. It didn't work out. Again, we know the facility is tight through the years, and when we get into that winter season with wrestling, they added dance and cheer and gymnastics, and we got basketball, and if the men and the women now play together at home at the same time, they're using auxiliary gym courts, and again, if you're out there on a weekday in a normal year, sometimes the cheer and dance or gymnastics are in the hallway practicing, and the facility gets used, and it's tight, and the mezzanine, we try to get fitness people out on the mezzanine, and we can't even do that, and the wrestling area is full, and so with our fitness classes, we got to move them into those meeting rooms, and that is tight, and then we don't satisfy member fitness needs and class needs. We tried to do off-site fitness classes at City Hall, and what we heard was people came to the summit and wanted to work out, and they wanted to do their fitness classes and work out after or before, and it didn't work to drive across town, and they didn't like it. We also at one time met with a retailer here in town, and we discussed about having a spinning class. Again, think of what Amy talked about, the Peloton, the online biking, doing a spinning class, but there was going to be expense to buy the bikes, and we were going to have to rent space off-site because we don't have anywhere on-site to do it. So we would have been buying equipment and renting space and trying to split profits. And again, when you start talking about splitting profits and renting, the numbers never worked. So we never got into an off-site spinning class, but though we did discuss it. As we get into 2020 now, year-to-date revenues at the Summit Activity Center are at about $237,000. I can go to a different sheet probably. I got to figure out what sheet I'm on currently. Again, in your packet, talks about adult recreation and the net revenue, which I already touched on. Total Great Life check-ins was in your packet. Differences in what we charged for fees, membership fees at the summit, starting in 2008 when I came to town compared to where we were at in 2019. And then also kind of talks about where we're at in 2020, which is a lot more simplified than where we were at one time. I threw in summer ledgers from summer recreation from 2010 and 2019, which would have been normal years. Shows participants, program costs, what we charge kids, what our revenue is, what we pay back to people, instructor wages. Again, give you that comparison because people were asking about summer rec. 2013, and maybe that's all I have. So we're back to the 2020 numbers on our revenue side.
So Todd, just so,
2019. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, Todd. So the commission understands that We also operate some of our leagues out of spaces that are not city-owned, so out of the other school gyms, correct, in the different school facilities?
Yes, mainly we'd be talking main gym at the high school and the middle school gymnasium.
So it certainly isn't an issue of demand. Demand is there. It's a space issue, but now this year we're going to have the issue of, if you're not there for school or a school function, those buildings aren't available for those things. So again, this year, the leagues and those types of things won't be something that we're participating in. And not that we get rich off of those leagues or anything like that, but it's another offering. And Todd has more ideas about fitness and recreation and things that you can, he and his staff are very creative about those things and what's brand new and but we have a hard time providing those things. We just don't have the capital budget to get the new types of equipment or introduce types of things. So we've had to take a very traditional approach to fitness, which is okay. It's just not probably what the expectation necessarily, I think, has, like everything else, expectations have changed a lot for people's discretionary income and discretionary time. Todd, would you say that's fair in the fitness world?
Yes. You want me to go with 2020 numbers?
Sure, we have about 15 minutes left so maybe give them a little more information, and then we should let the commission ask some questions if they have them and discuss a little bit.
You bet. 2020 year-to-date revenues, again, I won't throw out all the numbers. They were in documents provided, but approximately we're a third of last year's revenue at this point. Annual memberships went from 75,000 down to 20,000. Corporate memberships, 36.5 down to 19.5. Quarterly memberships from 68,000 down to 27,000. Daily passes from 25 down to 8. Adult recreation, 24,000 approximately down to 0. The SAC programs revenue, think summer recreation program and all the different recreation programs that we do out of the summit. Year to date in 2019 would have been about 71,500. This year to date, we're at 7,200. It's a 100 series. When we talk about the 100 series, that's more in our financial software, but that's personnel. And again, we've seen about $104,000 reduction in our personnel expenses, and that would all be on the part-time side. We haven't let go of any of our full-time staff. We've kept them employed, and some of them we did use in the parks department this summer, and we actually have one that's still out in the parks doing work for us since we don't have inmate labor. And we've been short some employees with Jim Snook's retirement. So down $104,000 in temporary wages. The unfortunate part is the expenses, which is the 200 series, which is our operating expenses, are only down year to date from last year about $50,000. So again, expenses down about 155,000 year to date, but our revenue is down about $510,000. Aquatics area, if we get back open, we're going to have to focus on open swims and swimming lessons to generate revenue. That's one thing that we have to do. Realizing that's going to conflict with swim team access and how they can use the facility for practices. Gymnasiums right now, we've got limited access by the school. They're not allowing non-essential personnel into their building. The auxiliary gym is being used as an expanded area for their lunch program, so cafeteria space, besides their after-school practices. Meeting rooms, we've got used for storage right now. And again, we're not doing fitness classes because we just don't feel comfortable doing indoor programming where you're going to be breathing hard and in a confined area. Yankton College office space we already talked about. They're not moving out until 2022. One of the things we talked about in the past, and it never got a lot of traction, was no longer doing a summer brochure, just doing online, electronic. You got to come out and find us on the web and Facebook. Again, that would save us about $5,400 in a year. It's just things we've talked about. So that kind of leads us to the philosophy part of facility and recreation programming moving forward, and commissioner thoughts. Again, we also know programming fees for adult recreation, youth recreation, and swimming need to increase in the future as soon as we start programming again. Again, going back to golf advisory board discussions, we know it's not going to be popular. The general public's not going to like when we raise fees, and that's just where we're at. But court rental fees probably need to increase when we get back to being able to allow people to use our facilities. Theater and gymnasium rental fees probably need to increase. We've had that discussion with the school. Again, the general public doesn't like seeing those things, but we are not keeping up with expenses, and especially if you start thinking about capital expenses. If you want to talk about trends in fitness, embracing fitness technology, well, that comes with software and TV screens on cardio and TVs in the meeting room so people could do their own fitness class or on their phone. But again, you can also go out and do that on your own without being a member at our facility. But again, if you start offering that stuff electronically, again, you have to have software, you have to pay licensing fees, you have to keep it up to date. So you add to your expenses. If that's not bringing in more new members, then we're losing ground again. Incorporating wellness and working out injuries and injury recovery is another big thing in the industry, and partnering. But Avera has their own facility, and they're also partnering with Mount Marty, who's in close proximity. So I don't know that we could partner with somebody on the wellness injury recovery side of things. The bright spot in national statistics is 20% of fitness members have multiple facility memberships. So those members that are out using fitness facilities, 20% of them have multiple facility memberships. So that bodes well for us, that people can do Great Life and our facility, or they might do Avera and our facility, or they might do Anytime Fitness in our facility, or Empower Fitness, or one of the other studios in town. And then the last thing to note, in the U.S., approximately 14% of the population has a fitness membership. So if the Yankton area population, we use 20,000 people, 14% is 2,800. So again, think 2014, we had 2,442 members at our highest. But again, we were family oriented. So you threw kids into that mix, where when you start talking national statistics, they're not looking at kids, they're looking at adults. The other thing you got to think of is we have other area towns and rural areas that also add to our population base, so we're actually greater than 20,000. So again, we've done a good job getting those members and numbers, but now with limited facilities and limited hours, we just don't know.
So Todd, we'll let the commission give us some questions and initial feedback. Probably what's going to need to happen is the commission's going to need to let all this kind of marinate and get curious a little bit about this and come back to us with questions, and maybe we'll need to have this, have more conversation in the future, because it's a lot to digest and take in. But I do want to give a little bit of time in case there's some, pressing question they have, so that they can continue, talking amongst themselves, one-on-one, talking with the folks they know at the school, talking with constituents about priorities and recreation and what people are looking for community fitness. So with that, I'd ask the commission if they have questions for Todd or I or Al about any of the information or just the facility in general.
This is Commissioner Mosier. A couple things I've jotted down that I'm curious about, and I don't really need answered tonight, but I think as we move forward to have an effective discussion, how much do we see what's going on is COVID? So if we get our grasp and handle on COVID, we see changing, and how much of it is due to the fact that there are so many other opportunities in town that exist that didn't exist in the past. So I'm curious on that breakdown, and then also curious, maybe more of a lingering effect of COVID is so many people are now working out at home. They're buying equipment to be at home, signing up for fitness classes. Has there been any studies or discussions, Todd, in the fitness world that we see that changing and people are going to start going back to gyms? Or are they saying, wow, we're really seeing a big shift in the fitness world, and more people are going to stay home even if we get a handle on COVID? So, like I said, I don't need that answered tonight. I think as we have discussions relating to what this may look like in the future, I think it would be nice if there's a way we could wrap our hands around that a little bit.
The one good thing about fitness facilities is some people do use them as not only working out, but also a social facility. So instead of maybe going to the bar after work to drink, some people go to a fitness facility and they socialize there, so you have that component. But again, you are correct. Some people have decided to, let's buy some stuff at home and do it at home. And again, the one secret from the fitness, and I don't know if it's really a secret or not, but one secret from the fitness industry is they like to sign people up for memberships and then get it on a reoccurring basis on a credit card and hope people forget about it. And so there's revenue coming in without necessarily people using the facility and wearing equipment out. So you have a little bit of that happens in the fitness facility in the world also, as people make New Year's resolutions. They'll work out for a month and two and then fade away and never cancel their membership.
We'll do some analysis. I'm venturing to guess what we're going to find is that the train was on the track and, already with the financial picture and membership and competition picture and space issue, and COVID-19 has just made it worse. And now I'd like to do some research about what does this mean afterwards, because I know I'm certainly going to be rethinking in my life, even after the pandemic, travel and group events, especially during flu season and things of that nature. So will people look at gyms differently? That's something we haven't really talked about. So thank you for bringing that point up.
And again, we have Aquatics, which is a little bit different. So you may buy equipment and a treadmill or a elliptical for your home, but if there are people that really love doing aquatics and swimming laps, that necessarily doesn't go away.
This is Commissioner Minor, and I just had a couple of comment and a quick question. First, thank you for the really comprehensive breakdown. It's really interesting to see the origin of the agreements. It's fun to see some of those old names like Barb Law and Leon Abler, Mayor Leon Abler, went to school with their kids. My question is, when you talk about a Great Life check-in, I know we're really new to that partnership with Great Life, and you talked about the promising numbers with the Great Life check-in. Do we have any way of knowing what they're utilizing in the facility? Or do they just check in and they could be swimming, they could be lifting weights, they could be taking a class? Do we have any way of knowing what they're doing?
Therein lies one of the problems of our facility. Because again, just through time, we've talked about, can you offer different types of memberships based on what people are using? Mm-hmm. And you have the front desk where you can see them come in the front door, and you can see, if they go down the hallway to the locker rooms, and then of course if they would go out into the aquatics, which is only open to adults. But once they're in our facility now, it would be a little bit different. We know that either they go to aquatics or they go upstairs, because the gymnasium part of it is gone. So it gets hard for us without specifically asking Great Life, because again, they have their own card that they check in with.
Sure.
We could do some type of survey with our front desk where anytime somebody from Great Life checks in, we ask what type of workout they're going to do, and we'd know a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm just curious, if we have all these I don't want to say redundant, but if we have all these services now, these private entities all around Yankton, if we're just offering a redundant service, that's one thing. But if we're offering something unique, then that's another thing to consider. That's all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. If they're checking in and 100% of them are checking in to go to do the aquatics, now we have a lot different discussion. If 50% of them check in to do aquatics and 50% of them check in to do weight and fitness upstairs, then it's, different.
All right, we are approaching the end of our hour. I'm sure there are commissioners with many more questions, but I think let's submit those to Amy and staff can work on responses to those. I know I have a handful here. But if there's no more discussion, I would ask for a motion to adjourn.
Schramm, so moved.
I move to adjourn.
We have a motion and a second. Al, roll call, please.
Okay, this is roll call to adjourn the work session. Weber.
Aye.
Weber is aye. Benson.
Benson, aye.
Benson is aye. Brunig.
Brunig, aye.
Brunig is aye. Sarda.
Sarda, aye.
Sarda is aye. Mybom.
Mybom is aye.
Mybom is aye. Minor.
Minor, aye.
Minor's aye. Mosier.
Mosier, aye.
Mosier's aye. Schramm.
Schramm, aye.
Schramm is aye. Mayor Johnson.
Johnson, aye.
Mayor Johnson's aye. Motion to adjourn passes 9-0.
Thank you, Amy and Todd, for collecting all that data for us. A lot to chew on. We'll adjourn here for a few minutes then and see you for our regular session at 7 o'clock.
I think we're still on the same meeting, so this is still being streamed, so just so everyone's aware.